All right, this is going to be the start of episode 34 of an Untold narrative. We have in the room, hello, Joe Peters, as his handle is on Instagram, which we'll get into later. Joe is the director of marketing for Vasque Footwear, I believe is your official title, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
And that's kind of how we've built up a relationship. It's actually a working relationship. Most of the guests that we've had on an Untold narrative have actually been humans that I've never met in my life before, but I've actually had the chance to meet Joe before. But you might be our first marketing person. So that's why I'm super excited to have you. But what's your 30-second elevator pitch about
Yeah.
yourself?
Well, I'll tell you, I watched a few episodes and I've never even considered myself a creative, right? So when you invited me on this, I was like, whoa, maybe I've made it. Because my creativity comes in the way of like creative thinking, right? I don't get to design much of what you see from Vasque footwear from a footwear perspective, right? They've let me into the lab a few times on a few colorways and things of that nature, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, I mean, I am with Vasque, really looking to take a 56, 57-year-old brand that's been around for a very, very long time and make sure that it continues on and make sure that, when I inevitably leave the brand and do my thing, that it's in good hands, and I left it better than I found it.
That's a really, sorry to interject, that's a great kind of mission to have, right? Shouldn't everybody have that? Like, as soon as, like, everyone should know that, like, there's a means to an end with every employer, right? It's just maximizing your time there and leaving it better than when you got there.
Vasque is a division of the Red Wing Shoe Company, started in 1905, and that's kind of what we all live by. Is we know that it's going on after us. We know the brand is going to live a lot longer than we are. So our mission is to take care of it, to take care and make sure that we're making decisions as stewards of the brand, knowing that people are going to come after us.
Yeah. So outside of the brand's perspective, how do you, when you're on an airplane or you're, going on a hike and you stumble into somebody, how do you like elevator pitch yourself?
Yeah, when I used to be on airplanes, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Man, normally I'm quite talkative, so I'm that guy you probably don't want to ride next to on the airplane. Most of the time, probably 90% of the time, I'm super talkative. But I really talk about, the fact that, Vasque makes footwear for going outside. And traditionally we've been known as a hiking boot brand and backpacking boot brand. And, from my perspective, those terms have kind of fallen by the wayside, which is a great thing, because ultimately a lot of this stuff is just made to go outside. So I'm usually trying to just get inside of people's brains and figure out, what the motivations are to going outside. And if it's not a big part of their life, what are the barriers that keep them from doing that? Because, I come from a background as a communication major in college, and it was all about trying to understand the psychology and then basically create a case to get people to go in the direction you want them to, right? Persuasion.
So is that the definition of a communications major? Because I had no idea. I always thought it was the most generic major you could probably get a degree in.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. You all knew athletes in college that were communication
Totally.
majors, right? And that was me. I was the baseball player that was a communications major. But I got into communication. I went into school undecided and got put into like a learning community, which was probably in retrospect for like the really slow kids, which is great. But it gave me the opportunity to really find a degree that I felt like was not limiting. I knew I wanted to have a job after college. but I didn't necessarily know what I wanted it to be. And I knew that I didn't want to be in business. I didn't want to be a business major. And that's not a knock against that at all. I report to a bunch of business majors, I'm sure.
Right.
But for me, it was more about, learning about myself and learning a liberal art in school that I felt like I could take and morph into what I wanted to use it for after I graduated.
Yeah, because I think the way that you position communication is like interactive and getting inside somebody's brain and understanding what makes them tick and why they make certain decisions. And that was like the first time I ever heard somebody explain it to me. Like, that's why I dug a little deeper, because like my perception was like, it's just a degree that means nothing, but all we do is communicate with other things.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the degree that can mean nothing, but also mean everything.
Totally.
A majority of the jobs we all have, you're gonna have to communicate, right? That being said, my communication degree did not make me an expert communicator.
Yeah.
It made me question everything I said, because we went through, in essence, like a scientific breakdown of the way conversations work. So it made me question everything I said, as opposed to make me like an expert, like salesman, right? Like I know what you need before you need it. I don't know that, like, at all. But it made me, it caused more questions than it did answers, for sure.
Sure. So before you went to college, like, talk about, where did you grow up? Where are you originally from? You know, you went into college undecided, obviously, but were you trying to, you mentioned baseball, like, did you try to go pro, or like what level of baseball?
Yeah.
I know that was also 8 questions in one.
Yeah. I mean, we all wanted to go pro, right? But so I'm from Minnesota, which is pretty common of people that live in Minnesota. A lot of us leave, a lot of us come back, etc. I'm actually from a small town in southern Minnesota, which is like farming country. I I do not have the luxury of telling people that I like grew up on a farm and milked cows and stuff, because I didn't. But I was surrounded by a lot of people that did. So I grew up in a little town called New Ulm. Speaking of baseball, state baseball champs in 2003, no big deal. Coming up on 20 years of that illustrious deal.
That was the peak of Joe Peters.
That was the peak, yeah. It's all been downhill from 2002. Yeah, I'm just slowly degrading down. So grew up there. Went to the University of Minnesota Duluth. So University of Minnesota is right over here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. But I went up north, for lack of a better term, up on Lake Superior. And I went up there to become educated in the arts of communication and play some baseball. I was a pitcher. I was left-handed. I say was in the past tense, because I've had stuff put in here, stuff put in here, stuff put in here. So I can't really throw a baseball anymore.
Yeah, that'll take your arm away from you.
Yeah, but I mean that's all part of a bigger story as well. So I went freshman year to play baseball and learn, obviously. Messed it all up freshman year. And then I actually did some college when I was in high school. So I did post-secondary in high school. So I came in graduating from high school with 25 credits, college credits.
Cool.
And that gave me the ability to, after baseball was done, I had a lot of my generals complete. So I decided to study abroad in England. So I lived in Birmingham, England for a year as a sophomore. And
playing baseball, or just studying communications?
Dude,
or just studying abroad?
studying, yes. Yes, just studying. It was actually, I went on like a random, like, I think the minor that I got was like chemical engineering studies. so I took some chemistry classes and whatnot over in England, but school was a supporting factor in that experience, right? Like I went to school 3 days a week, and got to really immerse myself in another culture, and travel every single weekend, which were inherently 4 days long, and took a month for holiday in the winter and in the spring. And that really that experience really opened my eyes to the opportunity for like global business. And for me, that was an eye opener because I really saw the way global brands could work. I saw the way local brands could work. And I developed, and I came in with a strong passion, and that's another story with my early years in terms of travel with my mom and dad and such. But yeah, went to England, came back, and then finished out my collegiate career with a degree in communication and a couple minors.
Yeah, I'm always envious of people who got to study abroad. I wish I did that opportunity. My alma mater did offer it, but it definitely always opens up your eyes. I always think that traveling is one of the greatest things that anyone can do, because as soon as you immerse yourself in different cultures, you just understand. Again, it's like you understand how people tick differently, and they're products of a different environment. And who's to say you can't pull and extract certain features from their cultures into ours, right?
Absolutely. And I think I really, really quickly, just in traveling, even before my study abroad experience, I was able to identify this period of curiosity when you get to a new place. When you're walking around and you are hyper aware of everything, think about the first time you went to Japan, right? You're like, AirPods out, I'm getting every ounce of this, right? Like every single ounce of this. And I really latched on to that sense of curiosity, and have tried to find ways to reintroduce it into my life here, because I think that's really special. I think it's super magical for the development of your brain and the development of your creativity to find yourself maybe a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit more aware as to what's going on around you. So I've tried to, ever since then, I've tried to get myself into situations where I'm kind of harnessing that idea of fish out of water, right?
I've been having a lot of that conversation with so many people recently, like two things, right? Like being more self-aware and then putting yourself in an uncomfortable position. It's really like the only way to maximize learning and self-growth.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? That's what I tell my team, right? Like, just I know that things didn't go the way we thought they were going to, but like I have,
But we
better.
learned X, Y, and Z from it.
Right. I mean, some of the best lessons I've learned, some of my proudest projects that I've worked on did not go as planned, right? No way.
Yeah.
It didn't even go close to the way they were planned. But I think, it got us into situations where we had to get really curious, or the project was going to fail or stop. And we came up with some really good ideas in the process, right?
Totally.
That never would have come if A or B would or would not have happened, right?
Sure. Yeah, there's always a bigger picture that, we get lost in the day to day, and we, lose sight of it. And ultimately it's good that you can bring that perspective back to ground zero on a day-to-day basis. But before, or after, I guess I'll say, like after college, you get this degree in communications. What are you doing, right? Like I just before this, I hopped on your LinkedIn, and it said you even worked for Target for a cup of coffee or two.
Yeah.
Like what was your first job out of college, and when did you and how did you transition into footwear?
Yeah. It's a wild story.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. I mean, I graduated in college in 2007, and I graduated college without a job, which sucked. My parents were super disappointed, right? Like, Like we put this kid into school, like we invest in his future, and he comes out like without a job and with these incredible experiences around the world. But man, like I didn't need to pay tuition for that. So I graduated from school. I went and did a postgraduate internship with a company called Daktronics. And Daktronics is one of the world's largest producers of massive scoreboards, right?
Really?
You've seen them. And people that are watching this have seen Daktronics scoreboards, for sure. Times Square, there's Daktronics LED boards all over Times Square. They're all over these new arenas. So I went, and they're based in Brookings, South Dakota. And I thought where I grew up was like the end of the line. And then I drove another 4 hours west into South Dakota, and I was like, damn, I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, South Dakota's tough.
Yeah. So landed in Brookings, South Dakota. And by landed, I mean I drove there. And I remember going through the first week, and there was an intern class of like 30 kids. And I was the only one that didn't go to the local school, South Dakota State University. And we're on like our fourth day, and they're like, all right, who has a passport? And I was like, well, I do. And I don't think anyone else had one. Right. So, and that's all good. They're like, all right, cool. You're going to Vancouver next week. And I was like, sweet.
Nice.
And I'm like, cool. This internship is going to absolutely, right? Like, sweet, Vancouver. And they're like, all right, so you'll go pick up the rental truck tomorrow. You'll pack it, and then you'll drive it.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, dude. And that was like an encapsulation of, it was a 9-month internship program. That was it. I drove 60,000 miles in 9 months. I drove to Vancouver and back. I drove to LA and back.
That was your internship?
Yeah. I drove really expensive LED panels all over North America. I drove an LED panel to one of the first events at the Javits Center in Lower Manhattan. That was another one where they were like, who's been in New York? I have. And they're like, oh, great, you've driven there. And I'm like, no, I've not. Why would I ever drive a car there? Right? Like, no.
And you're 22 years old just driving around the country?
22 years old, man, white knuckle in it, like driving through the Lincoln Tunnel, getting pulled over in the Lincoln Tunnel, right? Because this is back in the day when, like, you shouldn't be driving box trucks around Lower Manhattan. It's a bad idea. And here I am, like, cool, this is cool. And I pulled up, this is going to be like a 7-hour podcast. I'm so sorry. But I pulled up to the Javits Center, and these guys are like, you're 2 hours early, right? And I'm like, oh, sorry. Let's unload the truck, right? And they're like, no.
They're like, no.
They're like, no, dude, 2 hours. You have 2 hours until you can be here. So I drove a 48-foot box truck around Manhattan for an additional 2 hours before my time slot. But anyway, yeah, I drove a lot. So that was Daktronics. Drove a lot. Really cool experience. Saw the United States, man. Who's gonna drive that much?
Really cool experience.
Intern for Daktronics. Got offered 2 full-time positions with Daktronics and took one. I took a sales job in Chicago, and had an apartment. Parents were psyched, right? My mom and dad were psyched.
Made it.
Oh, all right. Went out the night before the internship concluded with my fellow interns, had a few cocktails, and had a revelation that, like, this was not what I was supposed to do.
Wow.
So I went in Friday, and I gave him the really cool, massive BlackBerry they had just given me. And I said, yo, I can't do it. Like, what? Yeah, no, I can't do it. It's just not right for me, right? So I remember packing up my box, taking it out to my vehicle, getting in said vehicle, calling my mom and dad, and telling them I was on my way home. And they're like, cool. We've got the truck packed up to go to Chicago. And I'm like, yeah, so about Chicago, like, I'm actually not going to take that job. And it was like silence, right? My dad was like, why not? I just didn't feel right. And he goes, it didn't feel right, Joseph, right? Like it didn't feel right. He said, well, what do you have lined up? I don't have anything lined up. I can still like move back into my room though, right?
That's still on the table, right?
Yeah, sounds good, Joe. So I ended up like unemployed for maybe 2 months before I landed at Target. I worked at Target. I got into, this is the beauty of this communication degree, man. When I say like, it can take you places you want to go or places you maybe don't.
Right.
You can, right? So I started at Target. I got into the buying and merchandising team. I started as a marketing coordinator, or no, a category specialist or something. I was an hourly employee. I was in data entry, and I was just hungry to learn as much about business as I could because I was a communication major and I didn't learn anything about business in school. And I did that, and I got an analyst role, and then I got hired by one of my vendors, Abbott Nutrition, the proud manufacturers of Similac baby formula, Ensure adult nutritional shakes, Pedialyte, Pediasure, you name it.
Okay. The
Working on,
hangover cures all around.
so yes, 100%. Also, like you talk about like passion brands. And for me at 23, those brands were not passion brands.
No kidding.
No, they weren't passion brands. So I did the Abbott thing. I was doing really well at Abbott. And then I actually like went through a little bit of a burnout.
Yeah.
I was working like 80 hours a week. I was running a team that called on Target. And I remember telling Abbott, I don't have a dog. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have any children. Forget about that order that I stated them in. But I basically said, like, I can be anywhere you need me to be at any point, and I can work all the time. And I did that, and it worked for a while until it didn't.
Yeah.
And
Ran out of gas.
ran out of gas, and it was a pretty epic failure for me, right? I had to go on medical leave because I was not doing okay.
Yeah.
And really, at I think I was 25, went through a pretty massive self-realization at 25 that I needed to get better and I needed to take a step back, and everything I had invested my time and effort into was my job, and my job was on hold, and I was forced to really work on myself, and I was taken care of to be able to do that. So I took I think I took 4 months. I went to a lot of therapy, and kind of rebuilt the foundation of the way I looked at life and at work. Yeah. And from
so
there,
you genuinely had a quarter life crisis.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah. And I mean, in retrospect, I'm really appreciative of the fact that it happened then.
Yeah.
Not now.
You know how many times it happens to people like later in life, and they missed out on so many opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it happened to my dad when my dad was, when I went to college, and like at that point, you've got a big old mortgage. You got a lot of stuff that is right here, and for that to happen just financially, right? Yeah. And for me at that age, I didn't have
no ties.
I didn't have anything, man.
Yeah.
Like it was a.
So looking back, you could say it was good timing.
For sure. Sure. I mean, looking back now on the other side, I think it has really had a lot to do with my life and my career since then. And it sucked. It was terrible, but it taught me a lot about myself and about what I can handle and about watch outs and about how I can lead people and all the list goes on and on. So, long story longer, I'm on medical leave. I see a pair of, now I'm going to get into footwear. I see a pair of Sperry topsider mid-cut boat shoes,
Okay.
chuck kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Lace up boat shoe. And I'm like, wow, those are dope. So I bought them and I wore through them in like a pretty short period of time, which is all good. I'm hard on my footwear. And then I Googled, like, I liked the silhouette. I liked everything about them. Red Wing Heritage made a pair with a Vibram outsole on it. I did not say that because you work for Vibram, but it had a Vibram gum outsole on it. And it was made by Rancourt up in Maine.
Oh, yeah.
Foot leather. And it was called the Wabasha Chukka. And I wanted that boot. And I found them on J. Crew, right?
Nice.
And J. Crew made up to a size 12. I wore 14.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay. So with my background in merchandising, I said, well, maybe Red Wing carries the full size run and J. Crew just carries a limited size run. So I jumped onto redwingshoes.com, stumbled onto Red Wing Heritage. Turns out they didn't make my size, but I randomly clicked on the careers tab. I found a job in demand planning, of all things. So it did kind of lever my background from Target, and was employee number 2 within the demand planning, practice at Red Wing. And then from there, caught up to Vasque, have done some jobs there, and here I am today. How's that for a 25-minute response to your question?
That was excellent. And I love that the last like 60 seconds were how you got into footwear. But what do you think because we'll transition now into shoes, right?
Yeah.
But I want to take a second to talk about at 25, that self-realization point. Like, what's the biggest thing that you learned about yourself? If you had to like choose one thing that's influenced the rest of your life and your career, because you said that it's allowed you to lead, it's allowed you to probably articulate, it's allowed you to go after things that, make you happy versus somebody else, and a bunch of other things. Like, if you had one source to like summarize, your learnings, because a lot of the people that listen to this, the demographic is fairly young. So, as people encounter hardships in life, and they're going to, not everything is rainbows and butterflies. What's one thing that could maybe, prevent as hard of a landing, or a takeaway that you've gained?
Yeah. I mean, I would say balance. What led me to where I was at was this assumption that I needed to work all the time. And, my dad and my mom both said, like, you're going to have to grind, man. Like, you're going to have to outwork people. And that's just how I was raised. And I was just trying to outwork every other person that I came in contact with. I knew that everyone was probably smarter than me, but they weren't going to outwork me. And that resulted in me working 80 to 90 hour weeks, which can happen every once in a while, but is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think looking back on it, I've really identified now with lucky enough to have a partner, have a wife, have kids, that if I can find even 2 hours a day to truly focus, that's worth like 9 hours of like sitting at your computer and trying to do everything, right? Like, I'm at a point now where if I can sit down and think strategically for 2 hours, I'm good. But it took me a lot to figure that out. I turned my back on a lot of people in my life at that point. I turned my back on my friends, my family, like numerous people. And the way it all transpired, right? Like, going on medical leave, nobody in the company can really talk to you. Just like, that's just, they have to, by law, like, give you space.
Sure.
So then I effectively spent a really good chunk of 2 years blocking everybody out, and then ending up by myself and needing them. And, credit to my friends and family, they were all there for me.
Yeah.
but they didn't need to be, because
Yeah.
I was not super kind or accepting or gave anyone any time. And I ended up by myself. And I think it's that balance, man. It's that balance. And like, you got to be careful. You got to be careful working really hard. It's critically important. But for me, I pushed way too hard and it broke me.
Yeah. I remember like a year and a half ago, it felt like I was working like 18 jobs all at once. And it was when I was after I bought my house, which I no longer own. It was after I picked up a second job. It was after I was doing all of these things. And I remember my friends would always, like, I have a very small group of friends. I really don't hang out with too many people. Like, you got to, surround yourself with a tight knit group. And they keep at, hey Dave, come out with us. Hey Dave, do this. And I just kept saying no, because I was so focused. I was so like determined, this like unsustainable goal, right? And then they stopped calling and they stopped texting and they stopped inviting. And then I realized that, and I'm like, oh fuck, like I'm literally by myself. They stopped because it's on me. I didn't give them what they were looking for.
Yeah. I think it's a tough lesson to learn, but it's a valuable one, right? Like it's cool to be successful at your job, right? That's cool. It's like, we spend a lot of time on this work, and it should be special. It should be something you're proud of. But do you live to work, or do you work to live? And you'll go through seasons of your life where it changes. But I tell you right now, for me, like my number one priority is not work.
Yeah.
And everyone at work knows that, right? My number one priority is my wife and my kids.
Yeah, sure.
And it's critically important for me to be around and be present for them, and for me, right?
Well,
Like the last year during quarantine, I went from being on an airplane every other week to not being on one for 365 days and counting.
same.
And it's been the best. It's been the best, man. It's been so good to be home. I get to like watch my kids grow.
Yeah.
Well,
You talked about, you mentioned like now you can like, if you have 2 hours to focus, it feels like 9 hours of work. I feel like a lot of people have understood that about being forced to work from home and how efficient people can actually be without the distractions of the day to day.
Oh.
And how it elevates everybody and everything.
Yeah. I mean, if we go back to the way things were before this, we're not doing it right.
It's again, balance. I think you can take bits and pieces, right? There's no perfect system one way or the other, but if you can pull and extract certain things, we're definitely better off.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all better off when we have some different aspects of our life going, right? Like, man, I'm pretty boring if we jump on the phone and I just talk like detailed numbers and strategies behind what we have in market right now. Like, it's good to know that.
Sure.
But you also have to have a pulse on what's happening outside the walls of your organization or your industry, right? So you have to be participatory in life to be a good marketer, for sure. And I would extend the same statement to design, right? Like, you got to keep your eyes open, man. You got to
So what, to that point exactly, it took me by surprise when we were on Clubhouse a few weeks back, and like you joined this like morning conversation. Then you start deep dive talking about sneaker culture and growing up and buying this pair and being a sneakerhead, and like with one of my friends, Che, who, like, now you guys are connected, and like I was just blown away the fact that, like, I don't know why I just didn't expect you to understand so much about like lifestyle and street culture as a director of marketing for a hiking boot company. But it's exactly what you just said. You have to understand the outside of the walls in order to elevate internally.
Yeah. And you can find, I mean, you find inspiration from a lot of different places, right? Yeah, I have a long, illustrious fascination with sneakers and footwear and fashion. And at one point in my life, really wanted to be a designer, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's cool because now I'm married to one. So I get exposed to a lot of it. but I've always been fascinated with it, man. Yeah. And we were talking about, what were you talking? We were talking about the Grateful Dead.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, I still am like very much a consumer of that stuff. And I don't think I'm ever going to stop. Like I'm fascinated by design, and I do have a soft spot in my heart for re-releases of sneakers from when I was a kid.
Sure. I
Um,
mean, isn't I always people will ask like, what do you think like separates a good from great product? And I think it's the emotional connection that you can build with the end consumer, right? It's providing, because it won't matter what the resale number is on that product, they're gonna go buy it because they care that much about it.
yeah, man. I mean, it is it's ethos driven, right? Like re-releases of J's or classics, right? Like I buy those because it makes me remember opening up the East Bay catalog and like calling in on an actual telephone and talking to a customer service representative when I was like 7. That was like my parents, like that's the way I think that's the way they defended allowing me to acquire so much stuff. They'd be like, oh yeah, no, it's like a learning experience for them because you're gonna have to talk on the phone and
Yeah, you got to go call them.
give their credit card number over the phone or whatever, right? Like from the absolute place of privilege that I come from. But I think I took elements of that and put that into the Clarion, right? The Clarion 88, and that thing surprised everyone in the company.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be really good. But I think we harnessed that same idea of like 1988, right? And for the younger emerging consumer, they probably weren't alive, right? But like we're talking about their parents because their parents probably had them. And there's something to be said about people that are older than us that had this iconic shit. And
Maybe didn't even know it.
yeah, I mean, they wore it because it worked, right? But I think for me, like if I can pay homage to my grandpa or my mom and dad by emulating some of the quality stuff that they used to have, that's just something that I like to do, right?
Yeah,
Whether,
that's fun.
yeah, like it's an old pair of Ray-Bans my dad used to wear, right? Like that's cool to me. Or like some dead stock, whatever, like old school Lacoste, like whatever, dude. Like it's all cyclical, number one. So I'm keeping all of my stuff for my kids. Like it's all being kept.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot to be said there, man.
Yeah, absolutely. When do you think about the future a lot? And like, do you have, I like to ask this question because simply like, do you have like a 5-year, 10-year plan out? Like, do you envision your life that far in advance? Obviously life's a little different with wife and kids and stuff like that, and they take precedent. But, I asked the question because, specifically something like COVID can take everyone's 5-year plan and slap it across the face. Right. And so do you think that far in advance, or do you take things kind of more short term? Do you have goals even personally, professionally? Like how do you treat your life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had goals for a long time that equated to an organizational chart and ending up at the top of it.
Yep.
And my goals have changed, right? My goals have changed. And that has a lot to do with just kind of the life that I found myself in. Um, I don't, my dad was at the top of an organizational chart for a long time, and until he retired. And he never really enjoyed a lot of what he was doing. I think he enjoyed work, but he was gone a lot and he was stressed a lot. And I'm looking at my situation, and I have a 4 3/4-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. Just ask him. And I want to be here for it. I want to be here for it, man. So so if it means that I can't be here to get to the top, then I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I love what I do today. I had a lot. The other thing you mentioned, David, you mentioned a lot of people younger in their career listen to this. I have a lot of people from my former university that I mentor, and people, here, there, and everywhere. And what I say to all of them is, you have to be prepared to take a job that you don't love. You have to. I would say, like, virtually every job I had before the one I have today, I didn't like. I didn't not only love it, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Right. I worked at Target in the diaper department, children's diapers, and I was 21 or whatever, 22. I didn't care. Right. And then I went and worked for a baby food company before I had babies. I had no emotional connection to the product whatsoever. I didn't believe in it. It didn't matter to me, man. It was a job, and I learned a lot at it. I have been lucky enough to now find my way, tons of luck, tons of privilege, tons of you name it. But now I work for a brand that I do have passion for, and that I can, put my fingerprints on. But in terms of the next 5 years, man, I could be sitting in the exact same seat 5 years from now, professionally. Hopefully none of the people at Red Wing listen to this. I'd be totally cool with it. I'd be totally cool with it, man.
Yeah.
Like, I like what I do, and I like the people I work with, and I love the idea of these outdoor brands standing for more than just making gear.
Yep.
I think COVID has turned our lights on, opened our eyes to, I'm pointing in my backyard. This is outside.
Yeah.
Right? Front of your apartment, backyard, local park, greenway. That is outside. Of course it is the top of Machu Picchu, right? Of course it is Patagonia. But the mental benefit that you get by going outside is static across the board, right? And that, to me, makes me feel like maybe I get to do something that is a little bit more than just bring shoes to people. Maybe I get to, on the marketing side for sure, like, maybe I get to celebrate stories of really rad people that are doing incredible things for the community. And maybe I get to drive awareness of the power of getting outside, because it is really special. And I'll tell you, like, I discovered it maybe a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
That's crazy, right?
Like,
I think a lot of people discovered it over the past 12 months.
Yeah. I've got persona we put a persona study out into the market a couple months ago. I've got some tangible insights that show that being the case, which is, and it's cool. It's really cool. It's cool for society that we're collectively, like, it's a reawakening to the power of getting outside, because not to say it's easy, but it is the omnipresent antidote to all this shit we deal with, man.
Yeah.
Right? It's really good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think just being more, again, aware of what's actually happening in life versus what's in front of our screen or our telephones or social or whatever it is, and just being more present in the moment and stuff like that. And you don't have to, go super deep dive into that, just like a philosophy, but just like on a basic level, right? So one other question that I like asking people, and I think it goes along with everything that you've said, but like at a very basic level, like, are you happy?
Oh, yes. I mean, it took me a long time to get happy.
Yeah.
It took me a really long time, and I wasn't happy for a really long time. But I think that gave me perspective. into first of all myself. I had to be cool with myself before I could let anybody else in. Right now, hopefully you don't hear the background from my kids playing in the next room. But like, I had to really understand myself, and it took me until I was 25 to do that, at least.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing that every single day. But I'd say right now, today, as we sit, I am incredibly happy, lucky, so lucky, and really appreciative of every opportunity that I get to wake up. Right? Like, anything I do after I open my eyes is kind of bonus in my mind.
Isn't it crazy that on a fundamental level, like that's like the best?
Yeah.
Like I every week, and I don't usually talk about it this detail, but like every week I write like a list of like what are like certain like goals or accomplishments and stuff like that. And usually like 8, 9, 10, it's like as simple as be thankful.
Yeah.
And like just that's like a check to like do, right?
Yeah.
And then the more you practice that, the easier it gets, obviously. But like even before going to bed and waking up in the morning, it's just super cool, right? Like we're so fortunate just to be here. And like you think about, how many famous people just pass away and then they get their 24 hours of fame on social media. Like, rest in peace DMX. Like everybody said, when you heard DMX, you knew who the hell it was. And like,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
such a crazy thing, like as a musician to have.
Oh, yeah.
Then he's gone. That's it. Done.
Finito.
So
Yeah.
it's like to your point about like just being here and like waking up, like, yeah, that's fucking cool.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
We don't. And it's critically important to be, thankful for the time that you have and doing things that truly bring you joy. And that's a buzzword for sure. But like, understanding what makes you happy is a big step. And again, man, it took me a really long time to figure it out, and I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah.
But I try to find those things and do them as much as I can. Right. Like and it changes throughout your life. Right. But I think it's always super important to take a step back and give yourself some credit, man. Give yourself some credit. You're still here. You're still doing stuff.
Yeah.
And
So
don't
incredible.
compare yourself to other people. God forbid.
What was that?
Don't try not to compare yourself to others. Right.
Oh yeah, that's a big one, especially today. It's so tough.
We got that social thing going.
It's so tough.
We're fully like tuned into what everybody else is doing, and it's hard not to compare yourself to other people. But I think, man, the less you can do it, the better. And just try to compare yourself to what your idea of what you should be doing is, right? Like set it on a daily basis. Don't do it on a year. Like, do it on the daily. Think about what you want to do today. Think about what you need to accomplish, and give grace to yourself. Someone once told me, like, man, I'm always like so cool with people I work with. Like, I'm like, oh, no worries. Don't worry about it. Like, don't sweat it. But then I would forget something, or I would get a number wrong, and I would just beat the shit out of myself in front of other people. And they're like, dude, you treat people with the same grace or treat yourself with the same grace that you treat other people. And that hadn't clicked for me yet.
Yeah. What is, I mean, I'm the same way, right? I'm always willing to give good advice, but I'm not willing to take it myself.
Yeah. You just gotta just be thankful, right? Be thankful.
But I was listening to another podcast. I think it was Stephen Bartlett. He's out of England or the UK. He's like an entrepreneur himself. And he said, every decision that you make, ask yourself the question of, even like eating a cheeseburger at night or something like that. Like, is the person I want to become making that decision?
Yeah.
Versus asking yourself in the moment, because you're going to tell yourself like, yeah, I could have this because I'll go to the gym tomorrow. But that's not the point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think life is just a series of decisions, and they happen so frequently, and you're not always going to make the right one.
Yeah.
But I think it's having that perspective to say, like, you're gonna move on 3 years ago, look back and be like, oh, you know what? I get it. I get it. I made, I did this, or I didn't do that, or what have you. But yeah.
Well, hopefully this conversation has enlightened a number of people, and we're able to kind of help not fully educate people, or prevent certain things from happening, because I think ultimately people still have to go do and live their life as they want, but maybe soften the fall as people trip in life. But this was awesome, Joe. I didn't know what to expect having somebody from marketing, but this was cool. This was a much different conversation than I imagined. It was super informative and educational and fun. And where could people find you if they want to follow along in your journey? I know you have a little bit more of a personal kind of IG even, but I don't know if you share like a contact with anybody or.
No, yeah, my personal IG is wide open. I utilize the stories specifically to really illustrate the fact that you can be a director of marketing for a footwear brand and like still be a dad.
Cool.
So my IG is, you mentioned it, Hello Joe Peters. Couldn't believe that was open. Couldn't believe it. Hello Joe Peters. That is IG. That is Twitter. I think that's all of them. That's Clubhouse, LinkedIn, you name it, man. I think I still have an ICQ messenger from back in the, no.
Yeah. Also just like, I personally love Red Wings products. I love Vasque products. I like the people that you work with also. So like, I know that a lot of people and conversations that I have are people want to go, and it's not to knock any of them, the Under Armours, the Nikes, the Adidas's of the world, but there are other really cool footwear brands like Red Wing shoes, like Vasque footwear, that I know that you guys are constantly hiring, and you're growing right now specifically. So check it out. Hit Joe up if you're interested in any of the above or anything in the past that we talked about, and follow along his journey. I don't think you're done yet, so you're gonna keep making good decisions from here on out. And I appreciate you joining us on episode 34 of An Untold Narrative.
Thank you. Appreciate you.